Hello, I'm Bill Woodward, a shareholder with Elliott Davis, and welcome to today's operational discussion with Ryan Lovelace on strategic planning with a focus on manufacturing and distribution businesses. In prior sessions, we discussed topics including cost reduction, project management, revenue growth, IT strategy, operational performance improvement, and supply chain. All of these sessions were well done, but I'm really looking forward to today's discussion on strategic planning since strategy aligns these topics in a cohesive, intentional manner. Both Ryan and I routinely work with manufacturing and distribution businesses in our customer base, and I'm sure that you'll find today's strategic planning discussion relevant, timely, and value-added as we all navigate this challenging time. In our experience, COVID-19 has caused many businesses to revisit their strategic plans to address potential post-COVID new normals, whatever they may be. Plans have been disrupted, change has been accelerated. Ryan Lovelace is a director in our management consulting services group, and I've had the good fortune to work directly with Ryan on some customer projects, and I believe y'all are in for a real treat today. Let's meet Ryan. Ryan, tell us quickly about your background and also maybe a bit as to how you add value to our customers.
Thanks, Bill. As Bill mentioned, Ryan Lovelace, I'm a director in our management consulting practice. I sit in our Greenville office. Previously, I was with the Boston Consulting Group and GE before that. At Elliott Davis, I work with clients on strategic projects, things such as we'll talk about today, like strategic planning, but also growth strategy, pricing, and transformation efforts. And then Bill, I know you asked about value. The value that our team brings, I put that into two categories really. And first is having done a number of strategic planning projects, I'd say we know what good looks like and how to get there. And I think we can help clients with that. And then secondly, this is about our clients. And so what we do is bring the tools, resources, and data insights to our clients so that together we can make the right decision for their organization.
Thank you. So Ryan, our firm, Elliott Davis, we have a strategic plan, and I would presume that many listening in today, they have a strategic plan as well. So strategic planning is not new, is it?
No, you're absolutely right, Bill. When you say strategic planning, it doesn't necessarily jump out or shouldn't as something that is a totally crazy idea. I would say many organizations have a strategic plan in place today. The one comment that I would make is that if you probably stack those strategic plans up and looked at all of them, I'd imagine you'd see a lot of differences. And so all strategic plans do not have the same components to them. And so what I'd kind of say to that is, yes, you may have a strategic plan, but there's a right way to build out a strategic plan and a wrong way.
A wrong way. So build on that. What makes a strategic plan wrong?
Yeah, I think while it may work for you, there's a couple of things that I think of or quotes that I hear that'll indicate that the strategic planning exercise is probably not what I would describe as ideal. And so like an example of one of those quotes would be, certainly I've heard people say, well, we need to update our financial projections in order to finish building out our strategic plan. And while yes, financials are a component of any good strategic planning exercise, and you certainly want to have the numbers alongside the strategy, that statement to me indicates that you led with financials and that you have a tendency in your strategic planning to really make it more of a budgeting exercise of, well, we go through our financials and then we just kind of tag the strategy on top of that, knowing we want to hit these numbers. Number two is, I hear something around, well, we have a great strategic plan, but we need to drive accountability. And what I'd say to that is part of any good strategic plan is going to be a tactical component that drives accountability at the business unit level and allows for monitoring. And then you hear another quote of, hey, our business units need to get their strategic plans submitted for next year. And again, while business units will need strategic components and will be ultimately part of the exercise, you kind of look at that as that's a bottoms up approach in the way that that's phrased of we're using what the businesses are telling us and then kind of stacking it all together. And that's what comes out as a strategic plan for the overall organization. There's a component of that that's necessary, but you also have to have the top down component as well, which is missing in that statement and kind of a red flag for me. So what I'd say is that if you're feeling like it's a financial exercise, or if the strategy feels very separated from the operations, you may want to look at your strategic plan again.
Good. So even though it's strategy, a strategic plan, there is an element of tactical in there as well.
Yes.
Good. So it sounds like what you're describing is really a holistic view to strategic planning. Help me and others that are listening, help them understand what a strategic plan looks like.
Yeah, I think there's three components to me for a good strategic plan, and one is every good strategic plan has a clear vision sitting at the top of what does our organization want to do, over 5 even longer time horizon, 5-year even longer time horizon. Secondly, a good strategic plan is going to have a mix of long-term goals that are informed by what's going on in the market, what your competitors are doing, what your competitive advantages are, and what the customer is looking for. So really market guided there. And then thirdly, as we mentioned, some of those business unit, but every good business plan is going to have allocated resources to annual plans within the business units that can be monitored to make sure that you're executing effectively on your strategic plan. Mm-hmm. And so going back to the top there, of just the good vision statement, I mean, you should be able to answer questions like, do the assets that I have make sense or not for me to be owning? Is what I'm doing and offering, does it relate or tie back to our strategic vision? Does it get us where we want to go, the investments that I'm making?
Ryan, does vision change over time?
Yes. It's not something that you should be looking at on an annual basis for your company's vision, but it is something that if you haven't looked at it in a few years, I would urge somebody to go back and look at it. If this is something that it should be updated, and things change, the markets change, and it should certainly be something that you look at. Mm-hmm. In that second phase, you really want to look at and should be able to answer, what are the trends that are affecting your business? What are your competitors doing? How will things in the market be disruptive to industry as we know it today? I mean, COVID is obviously an example of that, of you can't predict that, but those are the types of things that are going to disrupt business. And so you should have a long-term strategy in place that you can always tie back to going forward. And then thirdly, on that resource allocation and the annual planning, there should be very tactical initiatives of what we're doing at the business level and allocation of capital that is part of a good strategic plan to really measure success, hold your teams accountable, and make sure that you're investing in the things that enable the business to succeed.
So leadership would put this plan together, develop the vision, put the plan together. How inclusive is leadership with the entire organization when they begin to put the vision together and begin to put the plan together?
Yeah, I think this is an incredibly iterative process that should involve a lot of the organization. So you really start with getting that good vision at the top of and as an example, if I put myself in a manufacturer's shoes, for instance, you could say, look, we want to be known for the highest quality products in the market. And so from there, the entire team can look at it and go, well, let's look at the market competitors and take a long-term plan of maybe you want to achieve vertical integration so that you can control your supply chain as an example of acting on that highest quality. That's a long-term target. But then the individual business units are going to have the more tactical ideas around that. So for instance, you may get a tactical plan to buy a machine within a particular division that enables you to bring something in-house rather than having to go through a distributor where you lose quality control. And so all of those things tie together of we want to be known for quality. Vertical integration is a long-term strategy. In achieving that, I have a very tactical step of buying a machine that removes a step in the process that is typically being outsourced. And so it all fits together in this cohesive manner, but does involve a lot of the organization in doing that.
Good. And you sort of talk about it sort of like a checklist type approach, at least you mentally, and maybe you've done this enough to where it feels that way to you. And that certainly gets at some of the value, but why is a strategic plan valuable for the company or the organization?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that I would hit on there. So one, a good strategic plan is going to provide you with that long-term view of where you want to be, and also provide the why. And then it's going to provide a basis to identifying correct challenges that exist within the organization today, and further create alignment around those long-term goals and what you would do to address those challenges. So you can always kind of assess the resources and the projects that you have in place against those long-term efforts, and that's where you can always have that. We'll tie back to the strategic plan that we built, and then further, I think as you go to one step is, how do I know that what I'm doing is providing the greatest return? And that's something that you can help answer with a strategic plan of, this is getting me to where I want to go, and I'm not just doing all of these decisions that are financial decisions so that 5 years from now you go, man, what does my business look like and why was I investing in these things, when maybe the business case doesn't necessarily turn out to be exactly what you anticipated it. So having that alignment both all the way from top to bottom, but also across the organization, I think is incredibly valuable.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the process of building a strategic plan. What does that look like?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, there's three components to a good strategic plan. There's also 3 steps in the process for the strategic planning exercise. So getting definition around a clear vision, and then we'll look at some sort of long-term strategic planning by understanding the markets that are around you, and then finally setting those very specific targets on the business and resource plans. So with the clear vision, one of the things I find in strategic planning is everybody wants to very quickly just jump into the exercise. And so we often skip right over that step of what is the vision for the company. But again, that lends itself to, you're making a lot of isolated decisions, and you can't really find anything other than financials on which to base an investment for the company. So step one to me has to be, let's set a clear vision. And it could be that it's already in place and maybe it's just documenting that vision. But somehow you have to go, this is what we want to accomplish as an organization, step one.
Sure.
Step two then gets to understanding the market and setting long-term strategic goals in place. And so this is what's going on in the market. What are the trends that we think are taking place? Let's play through some scenario planning. We'll do some voice of the customer research. And so from there, you can set what are the strategic objectives that we have in a medium-term horizon. So less long than what a vision is supposed to provide of that 5 to 10 year. This is probably that 3 to 5 year time horizon of setting these strategic goals in place that allow you to really align resources around those. And then finally, setting those business and resource plans. At the end of the day, a good strategic plan, as I mentioned, isn't effective unless it's actionable. So each business should be held accountable for setting initiatives that align to the strategy. And furthermore, we'll kind of go through that process of, how do you evaluate success on each of those initiatives and tie it back to the strategic vision of what's the business case, what's the financials, what's the KPIs on something like that purchasing a machine that I mentioned, of like that needs to have some sort of business case built around it that you can easily tie to and track of, this is something that I want to do and this is how it contributes to the overall goal.
Yeah.
So yeah.
You can't execute on the plan without that final step of setting the business and resource plans. How do you get down to those specifics so that you can make it actionable, so that you can actually execute on what you set out to do?
Yeah, I'll give an example of some of the a prior project. One of the clients that I worked with, we actually had gotten through this vision exercise and gone through at a high level, here's the strategic goals that we wanted to put in place. But then what actually happened is, and what was necessary is, our team went around to each of the different business units and said, here's what we want to do. Can you help us put together business cases for each of the initiatives that you think will help support the overall organization. And then from there, what we actually did is take each of those initiatives, sat down with the steering committee, so the leadership team at the organization plus our consulting team, and we actually did a 2-day workshop of here's all of the initiatives that have come up based on the strategic plan and vision that we've set forth for the organization. And then it was you can almost think of it as somewhat of a healthy debate, also a financial exercise of going through and figuring out which initiatives are best for the organization, what's the timing of those initiatives, and when we want to execute against those over 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. And then obviously we were running the financial model in the background to go, there's a limited amount of capital that we have in our wheelhouse to deploy over those 5 years. And so when we think of our financial situation, we can't just take everything that somebody wants to do that has come up through the organization. And so that's where you have the lever of you can only do these certain things. And
that's when it gets hard, when you got to make those tough decisions.
Yeah, so it was, again, that was through a workshop effort of having gone around to the businesses and gotten all of those initiatives, but then having some sort of lens by which you can look through to say, yes, we want the tactical strategic plan, but here's how all of these tie together and why it's important. So,
I've heard it said it's as much about what you choose not to do as what you choose to do.
Yeah, I actually think that's a great comment there, because one of the things that you'll find is as soon as you start going through this exercise and going around to the organization, very quickly you get a lot of ideas, and people have a lot of pet projects that they want to work on. And in my experience, those pet projects typically get done because there's no real gating mechanism that exists of it's just kind of, oh, well, this project came up and you're not doing it all at once. So yeah, at the time, that project made a lot of sense. But if you took all of the projects that you were going to do over a year and you had one time in which you were looking at all of them, I think you'd think differently about some of those pet projects that get executed against. And so to your point, yeah, it's saying no to those things that typically may have otherwise made their way through because there wasn't a formal process to evaluate those.
Okay, great. So as we wrap up here, maybe some closing advice, some thoughts on how to begin the process.
Yeah, one of the things that I would say kind of right off the bat is it sounds like a lot when you start talking through the strategic planning exercise, and it feels very heavy probably to a lot of people to do it in an effective manner. But look, this isn't an every year exercise. You need to have a mechanism in place to where you can adjust and monitor annually, but you don't have to go start to finish with this process every year. And furthermore, you shouldn't be going start to finish every year, because then it loses its effect, and you do want to stay tied down to the same things and don't shift that often. The second thing that I would say is that, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, is this should involve more than just the leadership team. So yes, the leadership team will be heavily involved in probably phase 1 and phase 2 of the effort. But it does take more than that in order to get to where you want to be. Ultimately, the ideas from the business units will be critical in building those annual plans and getting to a strategic plan that makes sense for the organization and is well informed and focused on the right pieces of work. And then thirdly, look, just for getting started and before you even start talking about what your vision should be, I think one thing you have to do is you have to bring together the leadership team and set expectations. For this exercise to be effective, you're going to have to create a culture of open communication and ideas. This is going to take, some of the exercises that we talked about are scenario planning, wargaming. As you're looking ahead, you're going to have opposing viewpoints about what's taking place in the market, and everybody needs to know that they can speak freely about competitive or different opinions on what's really driving the business, what the business is intended to be doing, what's important for the business to be involved in, what the customers are telling us. There's going to be a lot of opinions. And it needs to be okay in a safe space, and that dialogue is good and it's necessary And so therefore you go, before anything happens, critical to set expectations and set standards as a leader in your organization. So kind of those three things of look, it's as heavy as you make it. It's not every year. Involve the organization and create a culture that allows for something like strategic planning to be effective. So
yeah, you said it's not every year, and then you mentioned something before things happen, plan. But are there certain triggering events or situations that come up that are sort of the typical drivers of needing to do a quick, urgent, deep dive in updating the strategic plan?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a few triggering events that I think can take place, and so one is some sort of shock to the system. Of, let's say that you had some sort of disruption of in a product line, or broadly speaking, of new competitor entered the market or something like that. So there are triggering events that can create a shock.
COVID-19.
COVID-19, yes, is of course. That's one that's probably a good trigger point to say, man, we should probably take a look at this. And then the second thing is, I'll say this is kind of tougher to identify, but if you find yourself being very reactionary, and not having that filter of, why am I doing this? Or, man, I'm just like kind of following, and that's probably an indication for me that you're not being as proactive as a strategic plan would allow you to be on having that clear vision and understanding of why all the pieces are fitting together, and that you're making investments in what you're doing. So the reactionary, but as well a trigger event such as COVID-19 that's going to cause a shock to the system and say, man, we should evaluate what we're doing, and why. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Ryan. I think this has been very informative. And to all of you watching, listening, we hope you've enjoyed this short discussion on strategic planning. If you would like a deeper, more specific discussion, we would be happy to do that with you as well. I'll also mention that we have two upcoming discussion topics scheduled. On July 6th, we will have quality systems transformation, and on July 13th, managing a merger or acquisition. And then we'll have some further topics after that. But again, look forward to July 6th and July 13th. And on behalf of all of us here at Elliott Davis, thank you for your time today. Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks, Bill.